so that we can get this recorded. But so this is kind of the dream team that we have here today. Timothy, thank you so much. Any questions? Timothy's going to be kind of checking the chat, seeing what he can do and how he can respond, and then we'll be taking questions at the end. So for those of you who do not know Bobby, Bobby is our resident tech career coach. And he has been such an amazing blessing to CodePath. And he is going to introduce himself, I'm sure, but me and Bobby actually used to work together at Twitter. He used to be an SRE at Twitter. And it's really, really wonderful to have him here. So I'm going to pass it over to Bobby so that he can get y'all hype. But before we do that, how's everyone feeling? +1 if you're feeling good, excited. +2 if you're like, I don't know. We're gonna see. We don't know. We don't know if if we're feeling Bobby yet. +1 in the chat. +2 if you're like, I don't know. Oh, +2. Ooh, we got a +2. Okay. I'm not gonna call anyone out, but all right, Bobby, you got your work cut out for you.
So I guess, can you all see my screen just to make sure I am sharing correctly? Let me get thumbs up. So I can only see a few people here. I'm not sure where the chat is, but yes, please let me know that you can see. Let me click the chat button. There we go. Looks like I got a few thumbs up. All right, so let's kick this off. Just like Catalina mentioned, today's conversation is going to be about tech interviewing one-on-one. I'm your newest tech career coach for CodePath. And our conversation is really going to cover some mindful things that I ensure that I remind students, mentees that I've had over the years on different things that I've observed with my years of experience on how I've seen people successfully get through technical interviewing, but also some things that you can take away as you're going through the process of interviewing at more than one company, which I hope you get a chance to, but overall just the value system that we have around communicating effective, talking about the work you're doing, practicing, and so on and so forth. But we're going to jump right into it and talk about our agenda. As I mentioned, I'm going to do an introduction real quick about myself. And then we're going to have specifically around skills that everyone should develop. I quickly mentioned having a conversation, basically how do you communicate effectively, practice, and then being ready to receive feedback. Now, that last one is extremely important, and I'm hoping that you all can continue to grow as you're getting feedback when you're interviewing. To quickly talk about me, I am this quarter's technical career coach. I'm not sure if you've seen my intro video inside the newsletter, but definitely check it out. We'll be covering some of those same topics that I briefly talked about in that intro. But more specifically, if you're looking to find me online, you can always find me on Twitter. This is my Twitter profile here. We'll talk quickly about just some things that I like to mention about my profile is that, yes, I'm an ex-staff engineer. Staff engineer is a little bit higher than senior. So it's someone that basically is able to help directors and VPs make organizational decisions on infrastructure change and stuff like that. We can talk about more about that later. I'm a storyteller, keynote speaker. I'm Haitian American, so I'm a first generation Haitian American. And if you're looking to find out more about me and my family, those two hashtags, Team Dorlus and Black Tech Twitter, is where you'll find me at. But what do I bring to the table in terms of the conversation that we're going to have? And this is more or less to enlighten you all on more or less my journey so far. And ultimately, the things that I'm bringing to the table are things that I've experienced over the years. It's not like I've just been doing it for a year or two. I've actually been in the industry for about 20 years now. I started off back in 2002 at the help desk. And if you saw the loom of my intro, you'll know that I didn't even attend college. I only have a 2-year technical degree, and I did certifications to level up. If you want to find out more about that, we'll have a webinar about it maybe in the near future, but definitely during our one-on-ones, we can conversate some more. More specifically, the skill sets that I bring to the table. So I am a systems engineer at heart. That means I understand how computers work all the way down to the components that are inside the computers. I know how everything inside there works. I know how to build a computer. I know how to put an operating system on it. I know how to run applications. I know how to service APIs. I know how to put it on the internet, make a computer talk to the other computer. I mean, anything and all that in between are skill sets that I bring to the table. And I'm actually a subject matter expert, and that's where I've been more proficient at. But that doesn't mean that I don't write code, because software engineering is also a practice that I I actually, had to step into becoming a site reliability engineer that Catalina mentioned earlier. But the programming languages that I'm most proficient at is Python, Golang, or AKA Go, which I don't know if y'all seen this new logo. Actually, that's a good trivia question. What was Golang's logo that it used to be? So throw it in the chat room and hopefully everybody, can scroll back and take, oh, yep, I see somebody says a gopher. Yeah, it used to be a gopher. And then I go to their site and now they have this logo here. So whatever, they're iterating, but Golang is a very powerful language. It's a coding language that you have to compile and it's extremely fast. So Golang is another language I'm proficient at, and there's no way that I could be a systems engineer without being proficient and really becoming a subject matter expert in Bash. If you don't know what Bash is a coding language that's available at the terminal. It's very easy to use and allows you to transition to other languages, but it's extremely powerful because that's like the foundation of how you build systems to automate yourself out of a job, which is a mantra that I have. And we could talk about that at another time too, but I enjoy automating myself out of a job. Now, in terms of my career and my past employers, I worked at Twitter for about 9 years. I know, 9 years at a job. You can just imagine all the things that I've seen or all the times that the system's broken. Or one thing I like to do is have a fireside chat about the time that I typed in the computer about bringing Twitter back up. Hopefully we get a chance to chat up some more about that at a later time. But I also spent some time working at Citrix Systems, which is a Fortune 500 company, and then I also worked for the state of Florida for about 6 years. But that's all about me because this conversation is really about technical interviewing, and there are going to be more sessions and opportunities for you all to ask questions about my past experience. But the real thing that I want to make sure we're all prepared for is interview skills everyone should develop. Now, these skills that I'm going to talk about may be things that you've already heard. Now, the cool thing about that is if somebody like me that's been in the game for 20 years telling you these same things over, then you better be doing them. And if you're not doing them, please add them to your practices because it's going to make you more proficient at interviewing and eventually get that job and onto a fruitful career in this field of engineering and technology. But today's topics that we're going to focus on, as I mentioned before, the first one is having a conversation. Now, having a conversation is something that I really have found is challenging for people that are starting to interview. When I say have a conversation, I mean, like really just have a conversation with somebody like me. Now, the reason why I'm saying for you to have a conversation, because what I'm hoping you eventually develop is being able to talk out your problems out loud, like talk your problems out loud. Talking out loud in front of an interviewer, especially somebody like me, is an effective way to communicate with each other. And also, I can help you get back on track if you're going in the wrong direction. Now, talking out loud may seem a little weird, but if the interviewer knows your thoughts, then the interviewer can be there to support you on this journey we're going on in terms of the conversation inside of an interview. But just remember that saying these things out loud really gives the other person on the side of the table an insightful view on what you're thinking and where your mind is. The other thing is ask clarifying questions. Now, this is where I know the nerves kick in. You're getting a little anxious. You're interviewing somebody that you don't know, and it may be a senior person on that team or whoever. Asking clarified questions gives you a chance to make sure that you're asking or you receive the question that they're putting on the table. One thing I've noticed over the years with students is that I'll ask a question, their lip will close, basically zip, and then they'll try to answer the question rather than asking more clarifying questions to make sure that they're calibrated at the level that I need them to, because we have a long journey to go in this conversation. So don't be afraid to ask clarifying questions. The other thing that you may not be aware of, especially from an interviewer like me, is I want to see how you do it. Like, running to the whiteboard and doing your answer or getting at the keyboard and typing in your answer in the code and not talking to me is not really showing me how you got there. I want to hear how you got there. I want to hear your thoughts. And yeah, actually, I was thinking about doing this as an array, but I actually changed it to a hash or a dictionary. Like, I want to hear that so then I can also collaborate with you, which is the last part here, is that interviewers are collaborators. If you didn't know, this field of engineering, we collaborate naturally. I have to collaborate with somebody to push code into production. I can't just push stuff into production without collaborating with my peers. Collaboration is foundational to engineering. So just know that the interviewer is there to collaborate with you and have a conversation. I'll bring that up again. Have a conversation. Every time I've ever had to submit code, or every time I had to present a paper, a research paper, I had to have a conversation, and those same skill sets that you showcase inside of an interview are the same ones you're going to take into your job. Now, the last thing I want to mention about having a conversation is that interviewers are not only looking at the skills that you bring to the table, but how do your skills mesh with the team that you're going to be joining, right? If you are somebody that can't communicate effectively or can't really build some type of relationship in the short time we have inside the interview, I may not feel you are the right fit for the team that you want to work on or the team that we're interviewing for, because I'm not seeing those attributes such as communicating effectively. So keep that in mind as we move forward into the next topic. And if you do have some questions, throw them in the room. I know that we have somebody taking a look, but we'll have a section at the end for us to actually, vet out even more questions so I can give you some answers. But the next section that we're going to talk about is practice, practice, practice. Now, if you didn't know, the reason why Steph Curry can shoot them shots the way he does and not even look at the bucket is because he has practiced and trained his body and his muscle memory to remember what motion it is for him to do that, right? Remember, practicing eventually creates proficiency so that you don't ever have to worry about the question they're going to ask or the coding exercise that you have to showcase or the whiteboard session that you'll have to go up on the board because you've practiced enough. Do not forget the value of practice. And we're even going to emphasize that even more, because my next slide here is changing the word or making an equation that says practice equals proficiency. As long as you are practicing, eventually you will become proficient, because practicing to become proficient means that I don't care what question they ask me. I'm a very effective communicator because I've been practicing. I'm a very great coder because I've been practicing. It doesn't matter the question. It doesn't matter that they give me an opportunity for me to ask them questions. I know you've heard it before in an interview, like at the end of the interview, it's like, man, everything is going great. This is your opportunity to ask me a question. Basically, the interviewer is saying, and then I have students that says, nah, I don't have no questions. What do you mean you don't have no questions? If you practice and put practice in, you'll know that that's a perfect opportune time for you to interview the company or find out more information or show how much you're interested in the opportunity. But you have to practice so that you know when those opportunities come up, you can just interject the things that you've been practicing. That actually leads into the next bullet point we have: simulating phone ringing and fake phone calls. Now, I don't know if you've ever played like acting like you got a phone call from somebody so you can prepare what you want to say, or basically running in your mind, if this situation happened, I'm going to say this. That's exactly what I'm talking about. What I used to do, or I do now too, is I act like I pick up a phone and I answer, and they're calling me about a job. Yes, this is Bobby Dorlus. Yes, I'm very interested in that opportunity. Can you elaborate? Like, practicing that allows, when that moment happens and your phone really rings, you already know what you need to do, and you already know the feeling that you need to be, the mindset that you need to be, and the things you need to say to convey who you are. So make sure that you're practicing the whole thing, not just practicing coding, but practicing the closeout question that I mentioned earlier. Like, you have an opportunity to ask somebody a question. Don't just say, nah, I don't have no questions for me. That means that you're not interested in the company. But if you practice enough, you'll know, all right, this is my chance for me to go and lay it on them and give them something that I can really show that I'm interested in this opportunity. So make sure that you're practicing the whole thing, including picking up the phone call. Another thing that I want to make sure you all aware of is, if you do not use it, you're going to lose it. And that means you need to code, and you need to code some more. If you're basically interviewing for a job to be an engineer, you should be coding all the time. You should always be learning new ways, or learning new methods, or learning new functions, or learning new libraries, or learning new ways to kind of like rewrite your code in a more efficient way. If you're not coding on a daily basis, this is a practice that I probably put at the top of the list, because you want to be a software engineer, you want to be a data scientist, you want to be in this field of engineering, systems engineering, practicing by coding every day. And you know what? Before you know it, putting these things into practice will eventually become proficiency. And that's why I'm emphasizing how much practice you need to be, because I want you to be proficient. I want you to get a question that you don't know, a situation that you've never dealt with before, and feel comfortable that you can answer the question, because I've been practicing and ready for these type of conversations. So just keep that in mind in terms of what does practice means to me and how I see it come out during interviews. Now, another thing that we're going to do in this session here is, since we're talking about coding and we're talking about practice, let's just do some coding and let's just practice something. Are y'all interested in doing this? Let me see if y'all give me a thumbs up in the chat room if y'all interested in doing some coding real quick. I think I have at least one problem for us to solve. All right, there's a few thumbs up. Now, the reason why we emphasize and want to bring this up, because I know you may not have had the opportunity to experience what it looks like for somebody like me to go through a coding exercise. So we're going to jump right into it. And at the end of the slide, I'll make sure I share out the demo link. But today we're going to talk about a problem and more or less a situation that I've seen students encounter in interviews or different scenarios, and ultimately showcase two different ways of writing code. But more or less, this is the value of practice so that you can be more proficient in writing code in a more structured way. We'll have some time to talk about briefly about, hey, what do I feel about the code, but ultimately just taking a look at anagrams. Anagrams are basically an opportunity to take a word that, depending on the length of it, could be reordered in a way to say or to spell another word. So an anagram is a situation where you have two strings or a number. One of them is arranged in one way, and then they can be arranged in a different way. I'm so sorry if I'm mixing this up, but what the exercise that we're about to do is we're going to write a function that's basically going to take a string of words and see if they fit this category as anagrams. And if they do, we're going to bucket them together either inside of a list, array, or a set. Now, this type of question is something that you can find online and find more details about how to solve. But today I'm going to actually show you two codes or two type of code that I've had a student write before, walk through them, and ultimately just, talk about the solution and see if we can come up with a better solution or just how we make things better. All right, so hopefully you all are aware of what anagrams are. And then we're going to transition into a terminal here. So let me know if this comes through when I click on this new tab here. Do you all see this online Python beta shell? Give me a thumbs up. Yes, it sounds like it. So awesome. So we still have the README file here, and I got to move some of the Zoom things around because I'm going to accidentally click the wrong thing. All right, here we go. So just as I mentioned to you before, it's basically a situation where we have two strings that can be basically reordered in a way to create two different words, but technically they're using the same letters. Now, the first one that we're going to look at, and you know what, I actually like night mode in this thing a little bit more better because I don't know, it makes my eyes feel better. Make sure when you're coding, create the environment that feels best for you. I mean, if I'm here in an interview and somebody does that, I'm like, oh, I know you've been coding because I don't even like the light view. I like the dark view. So do things like this and just showcase how you are when you're writing code. But we're going to walk through this Python script or Python function real quick, and then ultimately see if we can execute the run or click the run button there and see if we can get the results we're looking for. Now, if you are familiar with Python, for me, Python has been one of the easier programming language for me to pick up. It's very phonic in the way that it's written. It doesn't have that many syntax requirement like semicolon or curly braces and stuff like that. Very much indentations kind of imply the next line. But in general, if you are looking for a coding language that's extremely popular in our industry, definitely Python is one of those. All right. So what we're going to talk about, and I may say terms that you may not be aware of, I'll try to switch them up to apply to other languages, but in general, we're going to read through this code here really quick, and then we're going to click the run button to see if we can get the output. All right. So the first line here is basically the array that we're going to pass in. Array is full of strings. The strings themselves, looks like there's some of them are anagrams. Man, I'm having so much trouble with that word. We have cars, we have arc, we have dog, God, and we have actually God twice, but you can see that we are expecting these type of words to be grouped together because obviously reordering them, they should all kind of be the same letters. All right. But how are we actually going to do this? So we have our function line here. We'll just call it anagram check one, and it does take in an array. And I do want everybody in the chat, if you see any type of syntax error, if you see any type of, let's say, Pythonic things that we should do, definitely throw them in the chat so I can take a look to see where's everybody's skill set at, because I've already seen one just by this argument being passed here, especially if we're talking about Python 3, and that's the hint. So we'll see if somebody picks it up. So this is our function here. This is the name of the function, and it's taking an array. Line number 4 is basically creating a hash. So we're going to be using some data structures in our example here. So we already actually talked about one data structure above, which is an array, a list. And now we're going to talk about another data structure that's either in some languages called a hash or a dictionary in Python. And what we're saying is that line number 6, we're going to iterate through the array that is going to be passed in through the function. Now, inside this array are going to be words. So at least they use some good naming and variables namings for this program here. So we're going to be iterating through the words up here called car, tree, boy, and so on and so forth. And one of the things we're going to do is we're going to sort that word. Now, line number 7, and this is my feedback, even just at the beginning of this, is I don't really understand why we're sorting this word and why we're doing that. I would say that maybe some commenting would be there or some explanation of how and why we're doing this. But because I know what the code is going to do, I'll explain it to you briefly. So the idea is that we're going to take the word, basically the word variable, and we're going to sort the word. So we're basically going to take car and we're going to sort it to ACR, right? And then we're actually going to store that in a variable called stored word. Now, the game that we're playing right now is we're already talking about how we're figuring out if the words are anagrams. Basically, they're alike. And remember, I'm just talking about this code. We can go into more about pseudocode and all that other stuff and kind of explaining to you how you get to the solution. But I'm just giving you an idea of how I interpret code that's being submitted to me and ultimately enlighten you on things that I'm looking for. So this line right here, number 7, is a little bit difficult if I don't understand what you're doing or why you're sorting the words. And more or less, you submitted something that just says sorted words. Maybe writing comments, letting me know why you're sorting the words, but I know why. And the reason is that I'm going to create something called a dictionary where the hash itself or the key is going to be the sorted word. And then the values are going to be the words that we sorted. And we'll get further down in the line to actually see that. So line number 7 basically says, hey, if you look inside this dictionary here, which the first time it runs is going to be an empty dictionary, see if you can find the sorted word. And it's basically looking at the keys inside the hash and saying, hey, is that sorted word in there? And it says, if that word is in the actual values, then basically skip it. So basically what we're saying here says, if this word is already in the dictionary, so I already have the sorted word and inside of there's a list that has cars in there, then we just need to continue on the iteration that this for loop is going on. This also needs some commenting. I don't really understand why we're skipping words that fit that category, but that would be something that I would give some feedback. And then the last step here is like, hey, if I don't find the word, it's not in there already, go ahead and append this word into this list. Now, this line right here can be a little difficult if you're not familiar with Python, but basically we're saying this key, which is the dictionary and the sorted word, append to a list that word. Now, I may have said a few terms that may not line very well, but once you go back and watch this video, you can really understand what that line is doing, is basically building the data structure that we've basically called out on line number 4, but building it inside with a list of words. And then the last line says, hey, if that word is new to this dictionary, we don't have the sorted word, this is going to be the first time that we're going to create that list. So just create a list with one item in there, which is the word that we just found. And then the last line number 15 says, hey, return the output and then give us a result. Now, I don't know if anybody's looked around. I did ask 2. Looks like somebody figured out at least one typo. That's awesome. Somebody else provided some, it says 2 words in array without hash function has same key. True. It says if 2 words, all right, so I'm reading the question. If 2 words are anagram, would the hash function hash them in the same key? Yes. And that's what it is. It's like, soon as you take those words, you resort them and it says, hey, these words match because I already have the key there. Then you add that new word to the list. But what I really want to talk about is somebody, Thomas, said, line number 13 has a typo, and I'm not sure where you're at, Thomas, but definitely thank you so much. But the real thing I want to get to is I wanted to click this run button because I wanted you all to be prepared for something in your interviews. Now, this is back to Tech Interview 101. We talked about this coding, and we actually have another quick sample to go through. But the thing that I want you to get comfortable with is this right here. When I click this run button, watch what happens. when I click run, this right here, it said that there's an error. Have you ever written code and when you ran it the first time, nothing happens? Most of the time when I write code, something is broken. Practice fixing codes, practice debugging code, practice looking down at that stack trace and looking at what the problem is. Because I've had too many interviews where the student mentee or the interviewer themselves did not look at the stack trace or the trace back for them to figure out what the problem is. If you run code, get used to it breaking. Yes, of course I have a typo. Maybe I wasn't using an IDE that had auto completion, but just get comfortable with it because this right here could stumble somebody. I've seen it stumble candidates too many times, and all they had to do is just read the error message. Just read the error message. All right, but the error message was exactly line number 13 has a variable or actually a dictionary that we're calling that doesn't exist. It's WOR rather than WORD. Yes, I know autocomplete would have fixed it, but I purposely put that there so we can go through this exercise because this is something that you need to practice. We click the run button and Eureka, there we go. So basically we got a values return where cars and art are the same. Girls, boys, tree, do not have anyone that has a anagram up there. And then there we go, dogs and boy. But the key thing here is that we actually, I'm sorry, dogs and boys. I mean dogs and dog and gods. I apologize. And if you notice, we actually passed in two variables here that had, or two string variables here, or list variables that were the same. This is where that duplication came into play. So line number 19, I know that someone was asking if you pass a word, what happened? Line number 19 is the one that prevented us from adding duplicate values in there. But like I said, there's not enough comments in here. I would have to read and try to understand everything. And ultimately just be prepared for your code to fail. And if it fails, bounce back. Just keep reading, read through the stack back or stack trace, whatever the output of the error, read it first, and then try to go fix the code. Don't try to go fix the code before you read the error. So hopefully that gave you some practice in terms of just how an engineer like myself is reading codes, things that I'm looking for, and ultimately just practicing things failing and being able to bounce back as quickly as you can, because we got to get through this interview, right? This didn't really go into things like writing pseudocode, kind of the problem solving and thinking about the problem or ways to articulate them. But I'm hoping that when you do have interviews that may actually send code home for you to do. So actually, let me roll back. There are different type of interviews that we conducted at Twitter, which were we sent code with you. And then when you came into the office, we actually went through the code and kind of critiqued the code in front of you to give you some feedback and then allow you to update the code. So this practice that I'm doing here is not something you'll find at all places, but there are places that will send, exercises for you to perform and then bring them to the interview so that we could do sessions like this. Now, we do have a few questions. Let's see. Yep, somebody else called out line number 13 as a problem. I think line number 2 can be simplified. Awesome. With the list comprehension. Oh, that's a great word to say out loud. How much comment should you do in an interview? All right, that's actually a really good question. So one practice that I actually seen before is that before the student actually writes, or mentees or interviewer writes any code, all they do is write comments. Now, this right here is an effective way for you to kind of communicate with the interviewer what you're going to do. So if we look at my README file here, right? All of these that are comments out with the hash in front, that means the code is not going to see it, but the interviewer can see what we're talking about, and I can be on the same page as the interviewee and the interviewer. So write comments, but don't go crazy and write a paragraph. You're not writing a thesis. You're only writing one lines. I mean, most comments should only be one line, and it's just briefly describing what it does. If you think about pseudocode is the same thing. It's not like you're actually writing out for this, for that. Just say, hey, I want to do this, and I want to get that result. That's it. So make the commentings very simple. Let's say, do we explain every line of the code we write or explain the code after specific? Yes. So technically, you shouldn't be writing comments for every single line that you write. There should be at least a comment up here at the top here. Let me see if I can put this in there. So at the top of your function, there should definitely be comments that you put here that outlines more information about the function. You don't need it every line inside of, let's say your function itself. But for something like this, I don't know why that happened. Why did we sort this and why did we do that? Or for something like this, line number 12 now, why are we looking before and we just continued? I would actually add like a brief small comment in there. Now, what I'm talking about is really coding in a proficient environment. When the student submitted this, I can't believe it was a he or she, but whoever, I'll say she actually was successful at getting hired at Twitter with code like this. What I'm talking about is taking it to the next level so that your code can look like it's ready for production. Because when she came to our team, she wouldn't have been able to submit code like this because we would ask her to provide more context to specific issues, or not specific issues, but specific expectations of what this function would do. All I'm saying is if you practice enough, it becomes second nature for you to add code or add comments in there so that I can see, oh, she knows exactly what she's talking about. She knows how to document code so that it's production ready. I'm already past the results. I just like the fact that she wrote comments in there or he provided more context to what this function does. It doesn't have to be word for word. It doesn't have to be line for line, but just think about what code you would have to go expect for you to understand what's going on in the function so that you can troubleshoot, debug it, so on and so forth. So, all right, so we're gonna move on because we are at about halfway point here. One thing that I quickly want to show, and I'm so grateful that somebody said something, where was it, a list comprehension. So one cool thing that you should do, especially when you're writing in a specific coding language, is use some of those coding language primitives, ideas, and ways of doing things. I didn't do a list comprehension here, but technically I could almost solve this problem in just one line of code. Now, sometimes those one-liners are extremely difficult to understand and they just make your code, yes, looks like you have, one line to do, 20 lines of work, but it could be difficult to comprehend. This right here is an example of shrinking the code from, let's say, the first example. And let me take this out, which is about 17 lines of code down to 13 lines of code. So I cut out, actually, we had an import at the top, but in general, it's not that many lines of code. But I'll tell you one thing, I've had a student submit this code, and when she submitted this code, I know for a fact that, hey, she was able to take code that was maybe pseudocode stretched all the way out to reduce it down to a smaller footprint. And if I were to ask, they could also reduce it down to even smaller. Comments are missing from here also. But it is in a way that I can comprehend what's going on and be able to give an effective evaluation on, hey, if this code would be able to successfully run or not. But let's go ahead and click the run button to see what we actually get. Yep, we actually get the same results. This time it's actually coming in as sets. You'll see the words are grouped together, and then we don't also have the duplicates in terms of the values that are being passed. So those are two examples that I quickly want to go through and talk about what I'm looking for in coding exercises and or kind of like what codes can look like. We'll have more webinars about even more details about just coding in general. And if you do come to a one-on-one session, bring some code with you so we can even talk about it and I can give you, a straight up review and let you know what changes that you may need to introduce or practices that can make your code look more elegant, look a little bit better, or it might be on point already and I just give you a thumbs up and I'm like, yo, I don't even know why you don't have a job yet. We could be there. All right, so we're going to get back to the slide itself. And like I said, we'll share the link out a little bit later. Go and take a look at some of those, copy the code, try to solve the problem in your coding language that you're most proficient at. And hey, send me an email, let me know what you got, or share me a link. But ultimately, I really do look forward to you all practicing the skill set. And if you're coding every day, you become more proficient and all of this just becomes easy and it doesn't even matter the question they're asking. All right. The next section that we're going to go to, which gives us about maybe 5 to 10 more minutes in conversation, is be ready to receive feedback. Now, this is also very important in my list of things that I want you to continue to practice in preparing for interview, is that feedback comes in different forms. You just got to be able to receive it. And one of those forms that I like to make sure that everybody understands is that the more feedback you get, the better you're going to get. Feedback is received at the end of your interview. So let's say you go through an interview process and you don't get through. Guess what? That's feedback. That's like, oh, man, I need to think about what I did so that I can make improvements to become better next time. All right. Feedback is I submitted code and when they looked at it, they marked it all red and said it. That's going to only make you better if you go back and understand the value that they're highlighting in terms of your code to make it better. Feedback makes you better. It's not that you're being put down. It's not, and also something I want to teach is the word no when you're in an interview does not mean no, you're inefficient. It just means not right now. It just means you have some gaps and there's some things that you need to close. And that's where number 2 comes into play, which is document as much as you can remember. After your interview is done, go write down everything you said and every question that you can remember that they asked you. Because the thing that I want you to get better in the other section, which is practice simulating someone asking you those questions and you answering them, because now you have a time to go home and figure out the best answer for them. If your results was a no, you still got feedback. I need to go get better at these questions they asked me. Document as much as you can remember after the interview, including exercises, including the behavior questions, including even the intro, like how did you feel when you first gave your intro about yourself or explained yourself or just talk about the things you're passionate about. Like document as much as you can, and then you have that as a prepping guide for your next interview. The next thing I want to mention is collaborate with your community. Now, this is easy for you all because y'all part of a community called CodePath. Now, one thing I've noticed about CodePath students and everybody that's in this program is you are all very engaged. That is so important. That is your community. Because when I went to an interview yesterday and I felt like I bombed it, and then I went to go talk to my community, they uplifted me, they motivated me. They said, you know what, Bobby, you may have bombed it, but how did the interview go? What did you say when this happened? And remember, building a community is also spreading the knowledge out, because you have a friend of yours that's interviewing at the same place 2 weeks from now. Or what the value system that I'm hoping you create is that you get to tell your community, hey, I'm interviewing at Apple next week. And then you get 5 people that ping you and say, hey, when we got interviewed, we looked at these questions and we talked about these type of things. Your community is where you're going to get feedback, and you're actually going to be able to grow and become even more proficient at interviewing. Remember, you all are part of a community, very engaging. This is the first time I've experienced this, and Catalina has mentioned it to me before. Use the resources you have, collaborate, and just be ready to receive feedback, not just from those that you're looking for mentorship from, but also your peers in your community. All right. Oh, how did that go back? Here we go. Next slide. All right. So it looks like we are at the question section of our conversation. We are at about 4:38, almost 4:40. I know there might be questions lined up, questions out there. I'm not sure if we can have some come up on stage. Is that available, Catalina, for them to turn on their cameras and ask questions? Or do we just have them funnel through?
Yeah, absolutely. That's totally doable. So if y'all feel more comfortable raising your hand and asking questions, you can do that. Or if not, we can read the questions for you.
I see one question that popped up is, how do you sign up for a one-on-one session with Bobby? So I'm new to CodePath, and my calendar is going to start to open up sooner. Right now, kind of the way you get onto my calendar is contacting Kelsey and or Catalina, and basically reviewing, some of the things that you're looking for in terms of the conversation you have with me. But in general, that would be the way for you to get on my calendar. And I look forward to meeting as many as you all I can. And I'm hoping to do more webinar sessions or group sessions so that we can all, in general, just get together and answer some of the same questions rather than just being limited to having a space for one-on-one questions or one-on-one time. So definitely reach out to the Career Center, let them know you're interested in speaking to your tech interview career coach, and then they will forward along my calendar for you to get access to me. All right. Do we got a question? I believe your mic might be muted.
Hey, Bobby. Yeah, thanks for your time and all the information. Really appreciate it. It's been great. I wanted to ask you, what can I do, or do you know a platform that I can go to do mock interviews?
In terms of mock interviews, are you talking about mock one-on-one interviews?
Yes, technical. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean, so mock interviews for me, and I'm just trying to make sure I can point you in the right directions. You're talking about being able to, do a video conversation with someone or just
Mhm.
okay. So there are some resources that I know the Career Center does offer. I have some of my own personal resources that I've used. I will send them out after the webinar now, but I need to confirm that in terms of just CodePath and how their interviewing and mock interviewing process works to make sure that I'm not overstepping. But I definitely have a resource that may actually offer some free sessions for you to have conversations and really just talk to engineers that have gone through the process, either at companies like FANG, like Facebook, Amazon, Google, and them, but also some other Fortune 500 type companies that also offer, those type of mock interviews. But I will send something out afterwards before I say it on the recording and basically have to take it back. But I will reach out, I promise.
Okay. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah, definitely. Any other questions?
I think there's some questions in the chat, Bobby.
All right, let's see. Okay, here goes a question that just came in. It says, what would you say if an interview you were given a problem that you initially do not know how to approach? Now, that's a very, very good question. Now, the thing that you have to be comfortable with is not knowing the answer and being comfortable with not knowing the answer. And when I say this, I've been in too many interviews where the interviewer, the candidate, tries to hustle a hustler. That's basically what it comes down to. If I've been doing this for 20 years and you say you know about kernels and how system calls work, you're talking my language. Now I'm going to even ask you more. Can you describe a system call that allows you to do X, Y, Z? Or can you describe a kernel version that doesn't have a system call that we have available now? Once you start to go down a lane where you don't know the answer, the best thing to do is to be upfront and just say, hey, I don't know and I don't have the specific skill set, but I'm willing to have a conversation. This is where you're asking questions to get clarity on what they're asking. Now, when you get asked a question that you flat out don't know the answer, it's okay to say, I don't know, but I would use XYZ resources. XYZ resources is most likely you're going to use Google or Stack Overflow. And at the end of the day, you can mention that. This is what we do as engineers is we be proficient at finding ways to solve problems. If you can tell me how you would solve a problem, guess what? The problem is solved. Just be upfront and just understand that there are situations where you may not know the answer. Be straight up. Number two, don't try to hustle a hustler. Don't try to, yeah, I can do this, I can do that, because you might run into somebody like me. And or just be straight up and confident. Like, hey, I'm shooting my shot. I don't know if I know the answer, but how I would solve the problem is this. We are collaborative. We're going to communicate back and forth. You may say something that, yeah, that is actually what we're looking for. Or like, nah, that's a little bit far left. So just stand in what the things that you know you're comfortable with. If you run into a situation you don't know the answer, explain to them how you would possibly get to the answer. And if they want to dive in deeper, just go off and just think and use your brain during those sessions. Now, how do you get prepared for those type of things? Practice, practice, practice. Your community has a list of questions that you probably don't know the answer to. Go through those list of questions and practice what you would say and ultimately have like a pitch when that happens. And then you continue to iterate it as you're going through your interview. So hopefully that answers your questions.
Hey, Bobby, I had a clarifying question and a follow-up question to that. What do you do if the interviewer is a little rude when you say, hey, I don't know?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, y'all know personalities sometimes show themselves when vulnerable positions or vulnerable situations happen, right? I've seen or I've had interviewers kind of like try to break me during the interview and maybe even say something like that or be a little bit too, aggressive in trying to get an answer or trying to get me to answer it. Now, my thinking is that in those type of situations, number one, unfortunately for me, that might not be the company for me if that happens. If someone says, hey, I don't know, you've taken me to the edge and I still don't know, and you're still pushing, that might not be the company for me. And that's just me straight up. Number two, it's you that just have to walk away and be okay that that situation happened and it doesn't affect you, right? Because that's almost as if somebody's like pushing you and be like, you ain't got it. No, that's not what it is. Is that they didn't have enough grace to understand how to get the information they need to truly evaluate you as an engineer. Now, if you run into that situation and you still at the end of the day are getting pushed back, just be straight up and let them know, hey, this right here is making me feel a little uncomfortable. I've explained to you that I don't know the answer. We've gotten to this point. I'm hoping that we can continue this conversation because I'm truly and really interested in an opportunity working here. Is there any other topic that we can cover to really showcase my skill set? Look, I just came up with that off the cuff, and that's kind of something I would expect someone to say, especially if I'm making them feel uncomfortable during the interview and ultimately making me not even want to work there. So be straight up. Don't hide and shun away from it. And just know that when you walk away, it's not you, because you still have room to grow. If they couldn't see it, then they couldn't see it. But I know I can see it because all of you are 3 or 4 steps ahead of where I first started. So just keep pushing. And that might not be the company for you, straight up. That's my response. All right. Any other questions, Catalina? Did anyone take notes? Oh, we got a raised hand. Go ahead. It looks like you're on mute, buddy.
There we go. Had to turn my other mic on. So one thing I've always struggled with is like doing personal projects, like kind of building up my own portfolio. How would you say, how much does like having your own like, you know, projects code base that you can like show an interviewer or a company matter more than like doing like practicing leak code questions?
So this is a very interesting question, and thank you so much for coming up and asking this. One thing that I think our community is getting, unfortunately, in a situation where you can't showcase your work enough, is the idea that I publish my own personal projects and I don't really contribute outside of my projects. And what I'm hoping that I'm going to give you insightfulness is that contributing to external projects, in my opinion, are more valuable than your own personal projects. And I'll give you an example. When I see someone's GitHub page and I go and check out their page and I know it's only personal projects, it doesn't show how they're collaborative. It doesn't show that they've reached out to a community, updated something in their repo, and actually went through a full Git check and actually getting it published. Like, I want to see you play like an engineer. Playing like an engineer is playing in a sandbox with everybody else, not only by yourself, right? So what I would say is it's great to have your own personal project, but find ways to reach out to showcase your skill sets so that when I go look at your GitHub page, I can see, oh, he contributed to that library. Actually, that's a library that I use. What did he or she contribute to? Wow, you fixed that bug? That's the response that you want, rather than, that's a nice page. That React code looks good. Python, yeah, very phonic, very, syntax rich. But I want to see you, and this is even turning it up a notch, contributing to a program or an application library that's external, because the one thing you all don't know is that companies hire from those type of contributions. I've worked on 2 open source projects at Twitter, and each time our window for hiring opened up, the first place we went to go look is who's contributed to these 2 projects. And 2 people I know for a fact that we hired on our team never even applied for the job because we went and looked for them inside of GitHub and their contributions and asked them to come and interview. So I would say personal projects are great to have. You're starting out, get foundation, get consistency, writing code, but reach out so I can see how you are externally with other engineers. And if you're collaborating and you're doing those type of things, you're playing exactly like you play on the team, because that's what we do all day, right? So I say turn it up a notch and definitely look forward to your contributions.
Thank you. Actually, to add on to that, I remember for gaming, there's Bethesda, for instance, there's like one of these big mod authors made like this huge like project, and he was actually leading like over 100 different other like community members to like help build up the project. They actually hired him on to like the team. So like there are instances of like that happening. So.
Yeah, well, I gotta go look outside when I already know he's right. Taking care of everything. It's like, it's almost as if he's attending the meetings and he doesn't even work at the company. Why don't we just pay him to come and do this? And that's the mindset that I'm hoping I'm opening you up by contributing to projects that other companies are managing, maintaining. And then, you might run into somebody like me and I'm like, yo, let the first 3 people, let's give them a call type stuff. Yeah. Appreciate it. We got another 2 up. Let's see. We got Mark. Mark, I'm not sure which ones were first.
Hey, Bobby. Yeah, I could go. One question that I have is, so I'm pretty familiar with like how I would practice for more like leak code algorithmic style interviews. One thing that I sort of feel like I don't know as well how I would go about preparing for are interviews that are more like sort of like testing your debugging skills or just like more general coding like that, which isn't just like leak code. What would you suggest for that? I know I have an interview coming up that's sort of more on that kind of style, like CS fundamentals, debugging, things like that. And I sort of don't know where I should begin.
Well, first of all, congratulations on your interview queued up. I'm wishing you well, and definitely just be yourself. All right. Now, what you're asking is how do you practice more debugging and when things are broken, right? And let me tell everybody, probably about 60 to 70% of your job is going to be debugging, fixing bugs, fixing program that's not 20% of your job is going to be new features. And I would say there's a really small space, and it really depends on the company, where you're going to have to start from scratch. So what I'm saying is that you're mostly going to go into an environment that's pre-existing. You're going to have to understand how their stuff work and then be able to fix it and add new features. And maybe I do a project from scratch. Now, developing these skills, I do see a void on the internet when we're looking for opportunities for people to fix problems. I don't have one off the top of my head, but I will continue to do some research. I'm your career tech career coach throughout this quarter, so I'll continue to research and find something for you. But what you're talking about is exactly what you need to be practicing, which is, hey, this code has a bug. How do I fix it? And where do I start? And how do I build those skill sets? I showed an example earlier today where, hey, there was just one line that had a problem, and it would be great for somebody to like develop something that has bugs all over it, and then you get a checkbox once you're able to fix it. So I don't have one off the top of my head. It might be something you create as a side project, you never know. But in general, I think that is a skill set you should continue to practice. And the way that I've always practiced, especially if I'm looking at like writing code and not sure if it runs, is writing code in like a text terminal, not like an IDE or something that's gonna, autocomplete. Write it as best as I can, and then go and try to debug it as much as I can to get it to run without going to an IDE or going to the internet and figuring it out. Like that right there's a practice that I used to do. I mean, I had to do that practice because I was in the industry before IDEs were as great as they were. We only had VI, and when you wrote something, if it broke, you had to go figure it out. But that's kind of the practice that I would say that you should ramp up, is like, hey, get a text editor, write as much code as you can to solve the problem, and then go debug it without going on the internet to fix it, and ultimately continue to practice that skill. But there is not a service off the top of my head that I can offer you, but I'll continue to do some research and get back to you.
Solid. Thank you. I appreciate it.
No doubt. Looks like we have Ralph also.
Yes, hello guys. Thanks for the session. Yeah, I wanted to know, I'm studying like information technology. You know how that IT work. It's like you learn a lot of things. You learn network, you learn like Python, Java, and things like that. But every semester is like 4 months. So I want to know how good, because I look up like the intern for entry level, like Python developer at Amazon. It's crazy. It's very, very high level coding. So I want to know how good we have to be, just like in order to pass this type of exam, because they're not easy the way I look at it. I want to know how good we really have to be, not just like doing like practice here and there, but how good we really have to be.
Oh, thank you so much for asking that question. And I would say that this is the thing about our industry that everybody has to be mindful of, is that everybody's not going to be a software engineer. No, everybody's not going to write code every day. If you are going to school specifically around information technology, that's a different lane than a software engineer that's computer science engineer focusing on data structure, focusing on first principle computer engineering, and IT is a different lane. IT and those type of degrees actually has a broad list of things that you're going to touch. Like you said, you're touching networking system, but you're also touching coding and that stuff. Unfortunately, that's not going to give you the opportunity to be as proficient as your competitors in terms of the other candidates that are only taking CS courses. So just remember, that's what you're up against, right? The other thing is that you can develop these skill sets to basically be at the same level as CS students and onward, right? but it just depends on if that is going to be the thing you focus on. When you say information technology, the list is broad. Me personally, what I did in information technology would kind of be like the basis of where my, kind of like schooling would have been nowadays, is that I would find one specific lane and become, as much as I could, a subject matter of that. If it's networking, networking is where I focus at, and I work myself in understanding network. Anything else you do is extra. If it is systems, then I do that. If it is writing code and becoming a Python developer, then you need to put yourself in that lane, and that's where your focus needs to be. And everything else becomes secondary. But I just want you to be mindful is that you are competing with other candidates that are just CS students, and that's all they do. If that's where you want to be, you got to change your focus and narrow it down. If I could go back, I would not have been as broad as I had to be a systems engineer at the level that I'm at. I would have specialized in application, or would have specialized in a programming language and used that programming language to iterate. That's what I would have done. But being that we have to learn everything on information technology side of the house, it's a lot of stuff. Just find one lane. Don't feel like you have to only do that. You can try all of them, but whichever one you like the most, narrow focus on that and become as proficient so that you can get to subject matter expert level. Hopefully that'll help you answer your question.
Thank you very much, because that's exactly what I was thinking. Because this field, information technology, I mean, for me, like I'm almost done. I'm like 3 classes to finish, but it's very difficult when you every semester you have to take data structure, algorithm, C++, C#, Python, and network, cybersecurity, ethical hacking. It's a lot. It's a lot. And then once you're done, and then I'm looking at just like the type of job I apply for, it seems like I don't really have the skills, because all I have is just like the basic understanding of everything. So that's why it's kind of tough.
Yeah, totally. But also, let me tell you the other side of that coin is that CS students can't mess with you when it comes to all those other things, because they didn't learn that, right? So that's why you just need to make sure that you are looking in terms of your job market, those that apply specifically to information technology with a broad list of skill sets, right? Because I can have a CS student, and I'm talking about cloud infrastructures, IP addresses, understanding how network infrastructure work, and they're like way left, and they don't even see it. But I come and talk to you, and you are speaking the same language. Guess what? I'm gonna pull you up and bring you along. So just remember, the other side of that coin is, yes, you are learning a broader knowledge, but that also means that your scope in terms of what you'll be able to, work in is a lot more than just that one lane of a CS, computer science, software engineering lane. So remember, the opportunities are there. Just make sure you're reaching out. And I say apply to all of them. All right, we got one more person up. Go ahead and ask your question. Nancy, maybe, if I'm pronouncing it right?
Yeah, hi, Bobby. I just wanted to know, we can practice coding before interviews and read about data structures and algorithms, but how do you suggest we revise our concepts just before the interview, like a week before? What resources do you suggest that we should we can use to review our concepts?
Yeah, so this is actually a really good question. This is where, when I put in the slide deck about documenting everything that you can remember, because what you're doing in terms of lead code, practicing data structure and stuff like that is only one piece of the part of preparing for an interview. I don't want you all just ramming your head and just trying to solve these problems and write code day in and day out. You need to develop the skills like effective communication, or my intro and how I introduce myself, or when they give me a space to kind of say, hey, are you in, or like, do you have any questions for the company? Like, your preparation packet should include all of those sections in it, and included in there is coding, but that's not the only thing. Now, the way that you build up your index of the kind of questions or scenarios is use your community, the ones that are sitting around you that interviewed last week at a few other companies. And hey, I never have heard a company asking me this question before. What would you all say about it? Those type of practices are the things that I would put in place and be a part of my prep pack right before an interview, so then I can go in there and it's just not coding that I'm thinking about, but everything that's on the table. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Thank you so much.
Roger that. looks like we have another one. Go ahead.
Hello. Hi, Bobby. You have very good presentation skills. I just want to say that.
Thank you. I really
I
appreciate it.
admire it so much, the way you're in, like, you didn't say like a single time, which was very impressive to me because I find it really hard to not say it. But I saw in chat that you'll be doing one-on-ones, possibly. My question is, with so many topics that you could talk about relating to, like, the whole career path and internships and all that, what do you think you will be able to best help assist with, or what kind of assistance do you think you'll best be able to provide?
That's a really, really good question, because the reason why I wanted to host this workshop is that the first few students I've met, I've spent almost 5-10 minutes, doing a kind of like introduction back and forth. I'm hoping that we are past that. And now we can really just, once you get into a session with me, we're going to be tackling specific things that you're concerned about. Like the things that I want you all to bring to the table. Number one, I mentioned that earlier. Hey, bring some code with you so we can kind of review and I give you some feedback. Number two, bring some questions that the panels asked you and you didn't know how to answer. Like one-on-one session with me, and I'm giving you kind of like, write this down, you better write this down type stuff, right? And number three, if you just need somebody to uplift you, motivate you, inspire, that's something that I do personally, is just hear your story. I provide feedback and letting you know that this industry itself is in need of engineers like each and every one on this call. Diverse perspective is what our industry is missing. And I just want to make sure that I can inspire you to keep pushing forward. So those are kind of just sample things that I would say come to the table, but I'm hoping that our next conversation isn't me introducing myself again and kind of running down this, that, and this, but we're just getting right into it. And if we need to do, I know someone asked about just doing practice interviewing. We can flip the switch and I'll go ahead and go into interview mode and we can interview, and I have 4 or 5 question lines up and then give you an evaluation afterwards. It's whatever you need in terms of what you need for you to be successful in your next step. Come to my conversation, come to my one-on-one, and I'm here to support and provide value. So that's a really good question. I would say there is no honeymoon. There is no, hey, hi, Bobby. No, just come and let's get it on so that we can ultimately get you to where you need to be, because this is only the first step to this long journey in technology and engineering. Hope that answered your question.
Yeah, and just to follow, so I have a just like a personal project I'm working on. It's like in Python, and it's like a Discord bot. But would it be possible at all for just to me kind of like show you that, and just so you can critique the comments?
Yeah,
kind
no
of
doubt.
like
No
the
doubt.
comments,
So I am
the
on
syntax, and all that.
I am on Slack. So you can find me on Slack. Definitely just DM me. Know that my availability is a little bit limited, but I will try my best to get back. And definitely, if you do get a one-on-one, we will review that and I'll give you some feedback regardless. So yeah, reach out and let me know. I'd love to see your work. And definitely anybody else that has some code that they want to show, definitely highlight me.
Oh, thank you so much.
All right. One more person up.
And if you do have to get going, that's totally fine. Please just drop off, and then we will be around for about 5 more minutes, and then we'll cut off questions.
All right, looks like I have one hand raised. I can't, why am I not seeing, just tell me one hand. So if your hand is raised, go ahead and unmic or unmute and ask your question.
Hello, Bobby.
Yes.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I just had one question. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
I had just one question. Like, if I'm having like a big FANG company interview, how long in advance should I prepare for it?
Congratulations. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I know you're going to do well. And you said, how long should you prepare for it? Is that what you're asking? Okay.
Yes.
So one thing I would say is don't over prepare. Don't get yourself caught up in a situation where your mind cannot just process anything. Whatever you already have in there, that's it. That's what's in there. Preparation for me is at least a week out from the interview. My preparation is every night I'm reading some type of note that I left behind in terms of past interviews. So for me, I basically have a repository that I start to go through and answer some questions again from scratch, not looking at examples, and starting to get prepared. And that's a week in advance. If you feel like you have some proficiencies or skill sets that you need to brush up on, I would actually push it out to 2 weeks in advance, but I wouldn't be every night. It would be maybe every other night, basically focusing on my proficiencies that I want to sharpen up a little bit more, or skill sets that I want to sharpen up a little bit more. But then the next week is every night reading through my prep paperwork or documents or scenarios or conversations, or practicing like I'm picking up the phone, or writing code from scratch, debugging code. Is every night I'm spending some time up to that interview. Now, how much time I'm spending? No more than an hour to 2 hours, no more than that. And the real reason is that you just don't want to burn out. And then you get to the interview and it's like, oh my gosh, I can't remember nothing. You just want to sharpen up those memories for the interview. But this also means that throughout the time before you even got to this interview, you were still practicing, you were still putting in that work. This is just like almost like the night before the NBA championship. Why is he out there shooting shots? Is because it's habits. I need to go over there and practice these shots. But just don't drive yourself crazy and work out too hard, because then you won't be able to perform during the interview. But that would be my strategy. That would be my strategy. And good luck on your interview. I know you do well. I hope to hear how things go.
Thank you so much, Bobby.
Definitely. Next up, looks like we have somebody else.
Hi, Bobby. It's me.
There we
Thank
go.
you so much for the session. I really enjoyed it. I also have a few interviews lined up and I'm pretty nervous. My biggest, one thing I've been documenting as well, one of the things that I've realized is I want to get better at being more collaborative when I don't know. I'm comfortable with not knowing, and I literally just say I don't know a lot of the times, but I'm kind of curious if there's other questions or other ways to be inquisitive to get a little bit more out of the interviewer, just to kind of be led in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, this is a skill that you're going to have to continue to practice, right? And it's not something that that everybody has. You're very comfortable saying, I don't know, or I getting to that point, but there's still space for you to kind of, reach and pull and grab just a little bit. Two things that I've seen students do, or candidates do, and I got to work on my wording, I'm sorry, but candidates do. One is, especially during whiteboard sessions, they actually have a section of the board where they're scratching down notes, writing their thoughts down, really just trying to scratch something out. And before you know it, you may write something that an interviewer is like, ah, yeah. Or you may say something out loud that's like, ah, yeah. And you're hopefulness is that I'm going to say something and I'm going to hear that, ah, yeah, or that right there means you're not right in the right direction, right? And you keep fishing. It's basically you're fishing, right? You're not going to spend the whole session doing that, but at least initially you practice maybe using 5 to 10 seconds or whatever that 30-second time frame to fish as much as you can. And I've seen students or mentees, just candidates, write on the board what the problem is, rewrite it again, trying to articulate it, or even try to rephrase the question in different ways. You might rephrase it in a way that the interviewer might be like, nah, that's not what I said, and rephrase it another way. That's actually really powerful. And that might be one of those third ones that came to mind and I didn't even think about it. And then the second one that I want to mention is commenting in your code. That's what we were talking about earlier. And what I was saying in terms of feedback in the code is that once you start to comment in your code, the person that's looking at it is going to give you feedback off rip. I mean, if you write something in pseudocode, yeah, I just want this integer to convert to a string, and it'd be like, why did you write that? That doesn't align with. As soon as you put it out there, at least you give that other way for them to communicate back with you. But ultimately, that third one that I just mentioned is reiterating the question, saying it yourself, saying it out loud for them to hear it, and then just try to get clarity in the question, maybe even break the question down into smaller pieces, and just trying to open up that line of communication. You're either going to have one or two things. Somebody like me that's like, yo, let's get it. Or they're going to just be a stone wall and be like, all right, this might not be the one, but I'm going to walk away with something, right? And that's the idea that I want to make sure you maintain in your mindset, more or less. Hopefully that helps. Hopefully that helps. And I wish you luck on your journey. I wish you luck on your interview. I know you'll do well. Don't be afraid. Don't be shy. Just have a conversation, regardless of the outcome. You walk away with something. And remember that that's the real value system, is when you walk away and you know for yourself, hey, I tried my best and this is what I came back with, all these questions. So
Thank you.
No doubt, no doubt. All right, Catalina, I think we are 10 minutes over. It looks like we've answered at least everybody that was willing to come up on stage and show their face. We had some questions remaining inside of the chat. There are two things that I want to make sure I follow up with, and I took notes to those. Is one is a new thing that I haven't really thought about is practicing bug fixing and code that is being broken. That's actually a really cool idea. And maybe I can find a resource for it, or we might be able to develop something. I don't know. And then the other one was mock interviews. What is a good resource online for CodePath students to register for? And I'm going to follow up with that. So those are two things that I have as a follow-up after this conversation. There is a link for a survey or for feedback. I believe it's pasted in the room. Thomas may have pasted it, or somebody pasted it. I can paste it in there if I can find it. But I do really appreciate feedback. Ultimately, just hoping that I'm providing value to everybody in this process, but really just hoping that we can make this thing even better in the next conversation we'll have. This is our first time up, at least for me as your new career coach. Why isn't it? Let me paste it in here. Everyone, there we go. As your new career coach. So I would really appreciate the feedback, letting everybody know how this content, how much it works, and definitely want to hear results from everybody that's interviewing. And I'm hoping that you all find your way onto my calendar, because I can imagine our conversation and these one-on-ones are going to be fire. I guarantee you that. So Catalina, thank you so much for supporting. And we are at the end of this thing. So let me go ahead and stop sharing my screen. And Catalina, you have the mic. Thank you so much.
Thank y'all. I think Bobby wrapped it up beautifully. Thank y'all so much. And we are so excited to have him on board. And if you enjoyed this, please give him a shout out, maybe in one of the chats, because we love to see this. We're always trying to provide the most resources for you. So if you like this, please, either in this chat or like in the Slack chats, please make sure to shout him out, so he knows he's doing a good job and he wants to stay. And we will chat very soon. We'll be on with our, I think next week it's resumes again, because a lot of us are getting ready for resume review week. So we're going to do resumes again. We also started this group coaching resume style, which is a little bit different, but I swear it's going to help you all a lot more than having those one-on-one resume reviews. If you have any questions, please let us know, and we are so excited to continue serving you all the time. Please fill out the survey. We're going to send the email out either tonight or tomorrow, and then we'll go from there. All right.
Catalina, I just had one more thing to add. I just looked at the survey. It doesn't have the right title on it. I believe it's something else. I believe it was the talk that you were originally going to get, but we kind of switched up. You all just remember the date. It's today's date. July 14th is the event that you attended, and we look forward to the feedback. Thank you so much.
Bye, y'all.